at about 4 o'clock, with hopes of resting up and preparing for our fishing trip to Pulau Sangiang the next day. The weather was clear and the sea calm, but the atmosphere in the old house where we were staying was immediately unsettling. The house stood at the end of a narrow, dimly lit street. Situated next to an overgrown field choked with tall grass, the house looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. Its cracked walls and peeling paint created an eerie ambience that enveloped us as we stepped inside. That night, we decided to stay up late, chatting about our fishing plans and sharing stories from past trips. Though I tried to enjoy the company, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that clung to me. Every time I looked towards the window of my room, which faced the sea, it felt as if something was watching me from afar. Eventually, I decided to go to bed early. I felt extremely tired and wanted to rest up for the next day. I said goodnight to my friends and went upstairs to sleep in a room with a direct view of the ocean. The night wore on, and I woke up feeling inexplicably anxious. I was lying on my side, and when I opened my eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was someone lying next to me, though their body was turned away, making their face hard to see. I felt heavy-headed and forced myself to look closer. When I finally managed to see their face, I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. The figure turned towards me. Its face was pale with eyes wide open in a frightening stare. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I was paralyzed, staring at that face with intense fear. I tried to recite prayers in my mind, hoping for protection. But the figure began to mimic my prayers with a hoarse, echoing voice. Each word I uttered, it followed along, amplifying the horror and dread. It felt like time stood still, and I couldn't escape from that nightmarish vision. Eventually, in a state of extreme terror, I fainted. I woke up the next morning feeling deeply exhausted. My friends had already begun preparing for the fishing trip, assuming I was just sleeping soundly. When I recounted the events of the previous night, their expressions changed drastically. They were all silent, and one of them eventually asked the housekeeper about the history of the place. The housekeeper sighed heavily before explaining that the house was indeed known to be haunted. The area around it was once a burial ground for Indonesian fighters who had died in battles against the Japanese. Many others had experienced similar terrifying events, which is why the place was infamous for its eerie reputation. Hearing this made my whole body shiver, and I couldn't shake the fear that had gripped me and my friends. We decided to leave the house earlier than planned. Although the fishing trip was supposed to continue, we all felt uncomfortable and wanted to get away from that place as soon as possible. As we left the house, I glanced back at the window of the room I had slept in. There, I saw a faint figure watching us as we drove away. That gaze felt like a reminder of what we had experienced that night. When we arrived at Pulau Sangiang, the unease didn't lift. Throughout the fishing trip, the feeling of discomfort and fear lingered. Every strange noise and every moving shadow brought back memories of that terrifying night in the old house. By the time we returned from the trip, we all agreed that we would never forget that experience. The house and the night we spent in it would forever be part of our unsettling memories, untouched by time.